Greetings, everyone, and a warm welcome to this edition of the Customer Success Leadership Roundtable. I'm Andrew Marks, the co-founder of Success and the architect behind Success Coaching and our Success Coaching training program. Thrilled to lead our monthly live CS Leadership Roundtable webcast today. Today, we unravel the intricacies and nuances of managing up. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the epicenter of customer success, professional development training with a global student base of over now 27,000 students from more than 95 countries on our platform. Our programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. We have an extensive lineup of upcoming boot camps and workshops in Q4, and we're getting ready to post our stuff for Q1 here in the next week or two, but they're all tailored to refine your customer success acumen or your team's customer success acumen, including outcome-based selling, our very popular CCSM Level 1 and Level 2, including an EMEA time zone friendly Level 1 at, I think it's the first week of December. So we'll be kicking that off at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Those days, and some workshops from some of our strategic partners delivering some really high value instruction on our platform. So check out the detailed schedule on our website or in the chat, where Ashley will drop a link, as well as some details about any coupon codes that we may have, any specials that we may have, whether it's a self-paced learning, a boot camp, a workshop, or a more gradual weekly coaching program. We've got quality customer-focused programs and formats that will suit the needs of anyone and everyone on your staff. So if you or any of your team members are looking to upgrade their customer-facing skills, we've got a program for that. And you can find out more about all of our online learning and instructor-led workshops at successcoaching.co. Also, it's that time of year when we're determining our topics and guest lists for next year's CSLR webinar series. Your insights are a catalyst for our evolving roundtable discussion. So please share your topic suggestions or your interest in participating in one of these panels through the survey link that Ashley has also provided in the chat. Now, for those of you that haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic that's relevant to customer success leadership, regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the size of the customers your teams deal with. We aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. Click on the events tab at the top of the page to find out more. And our next and final CS Leadership Roundtable event for 2023 is scheduled for December 6th, when we'll talk about how customer success roles and responsibilities differ in various companies and industries. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded, and we'll be posting a replay along with a transcript on our website early next week. We will be taking questions, so please don't be shy and engage with us using that Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen to ask your own question or upvote one that's already there. And we answer questions based on upvotes. We're also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live, and we've got somebody monitoring that feed. So if you have questions, please post them, and Tracy will relay them to us also. One more thing, please keep all commentary to the chat window and questions to the Q&A window. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those working with or leading customer success teams on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite three panelists to join me. Unfortunately, our third panelist, actually two tries at our third panelist, and we ended up bowing out due to the first one bowing out because of a family issue, and the other one bowing out because of sickness. So it's just going to be the three of us today. So normally we'd invite three panelists. So it's just going to be the three of us having this roundtable discussion. Now, these are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all. Both are returning panelists, and they're going to talk a little bit about who they are and what they do. And let's get started in alphabetical order, as usual, with Josh.
Yeah, first name alphabetical order, thankfully.
Yes.
So Josh Zamora. I am based in San Diego, as Andrew said earlier. I'm a customer success leader. I've been in the space for 12 to 14 years. I can't remember exactly how many years that is at this point. Currently on the lookout for my next leadership role. So if you're out there, you need a new senior director or VP director of CS, then I'm here. Reach out to me, and we'll stay in touch. But nice to be here. Thanks again, Andrew, and looking forward to the topic today.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. And once again, thanks for being on the program yet again. Definitely appreciate that. And another returning guest, Madison.
Hey, everyone. I'm Madison Hall. I'm a customer success leader in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been with my current company for 5 years. I started out here as a CSM, and now I manage all of our East Coast CSMs as well as Canada. So very excited to be here. Love the topic today. So thanks for having me, Andrew.
Awesome. And once again, please send our best to Chris. We were going to have an interesting dynamic here today. Chris, who is Madison's boss, we thought it'd be a great combination having Madison talking about managing up with her boss on the roundtable. But unfortunately, he's fallen ill and can't make it. So
I have definitely some stories, though. I definitely have some stories that I'll sprinkle in. So He has been my boss for 5 years, actually. So definitely have a lot of managing up stories with him.
Awesome. Well, just remember, he's going to probably watch this.
He will.
He is a frequent attendee, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
I'll be as nice as possible, as nice as I can be, for sure.
Okay, please do. Well, I don't know. Just let her rip. Just let her rip. Anyways, to the topic at hand, managing up is often mentioned as a critical skill for career growth, yet it remains one of the most nuanced and misunderstood practices in the professional realm. How can we advocate for our teams while strategically ensuring our voices are heard by the leaders we want to impress? Can managing up be a double-edged sword? We'll explore these questions and more, sharing some real-life examples where managing up has had a significant impact on career paths. Together, we'll discuss the delicate balance between team success and personal advocacy. And as we unravel the complexities of aligning team needs with corporate goals, especially during leadership transitions, our panelists are going to shed some light on equipping teams with the skills to manage upward effectively. So let's start with a critical examination. In a world where leadership and organizational priorities are constantly evolving, what innovative strategies can we employ to elevate our teams and ourselves? And to get us started, how do you define managing up within the context of customer success? And why do you believe it's essential for the career advancement of your team as well as yourself?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So I think in the simplest terms, managing up really has to do with making your boss's job easier. And in that, in making your boss's job easier, you're going to identify what matters to them and how they, quantify success, right? How are they going to see you as being a success as an individual leader, as well as your team being successful on the whole? It probably is one of the most difficult tasks because in customer success specifically, how we qualify and quantify what we do and how we reach a successful outcome can be very challenging, right? Like sometimes we're not the ones who hold the keys to the revenue or to those decisions. So making sure that we're putting ourselves in a position with our leadership that shows my team is essential to making this ship run and run efficiently. And then also putting yourself in a position that says, it's not just my team that's great. They're actually great because I am unlocking all of that greatness within them. And that helps our boss show up to his leadership in the best way possible, right? Because we're making kind of that trickle-down effect of making everyone look great and thrive in their position. And that will then translate into how our boss shows up for his leadership, which is probably the highest level of leadership that, your company has. So it's incredibly important to scale how you're going to have that relationship with your boss in order for him to then do the same for his leadership.
Yeah, and I just want to jump on top of that. Like, right, there's an element of being an advocate, something you called out, Madison, about being an advocate for your team. That's really important, right? So I like to say that as a CS leader, I've now become an employee success manager, where my success, the team's success, is very contingent on a lot of the same activities that I did with my customers, having regular check-ins, having quarterly reviews, and then making sure that we're building out the advocates appropriately. And sorry, my dog is going crazy right this second. But having the right level of advocacy around what success looks like. So something you mentioned earlier, right? Being able to track and measure what success looks like and being able to define those metrics appropriately, not just for the customers that you're working with, that your team is working with, but with the company that you're a part of. That managing up experience is so incredibly important.
Well, I mean, it sounds very much like the same type of questions that we want to answer when we're dealing with our customers.
Yeah.
Right. It's building a success plan, but for our manager.
Yep.
Right.
And I always tell my CSMs, at the end of the day, am I worried about escalations and technical issues? Of course. But my biggest concern is the relationship, the deep personal relationship we have with each and every customer that we come across. The exact same thing is with your leader. You do have to know and deeply empathize with your leader as a person and understand like what those things are that he or she loves, he or she takes as, the values that they take as, important to them. And then that's going to help you shape how you want to show up with them in your one-on-ones or in your reviews. I've had leaders who love paragraphs upon paragraphs of detail about everything that your team has done or hasn't done or what they could be doing better. But my boss currently would die if I submitted, 5 paragraphs on the outcomes of my team, right? He is much more along the lines of how can you quantify what we're doing? So that looks like, how much upsell and how many accounts saved and what's our renewal percentages. So understanding kind of what type of true person this is going to help you to be able to, position yourself in the best possible light when you are having those discussions with your leader. And that takes time. Learning a human being takes time. It's like any relationship in your life. You got to put in the hours to get to know them and get to know what they love. And that will help you in your managing up journey for sure.
Well, it's one of the 5 key elements of managing up, right? Learning and adapting to your manager's style, right? Their way of working. Which once again, I'm gonna draw the parallels to what we do with our customers, right? Part of what we want to do is understand, okay, what's the path that you want to take to get to your desired outcome? Mm-hmm. You also mentioned quantifying success. Again, something else that we should be doing with our customers. And when you think about it, once again, people talk about how hard it is, but really we're doing it with our customers, right?
We do.
Right? You're talking about the keys to managing up, understanding what your manager wants to achieve. Okay. So parallel, understanding what your customer wants to achieve, what their desired outcome. Developing a positive and productive relationship, right, with your manager. Like I said, learning and adapting to your manager's style, communicating, your own, here's how we work. So here's how we're going to work together. And then anticipating their needs. And these are all key elements of anybody in a customer success role. So why this should be easy? Why it should be a slam dunk, right?
Yeah, they should be. Yes, absolutely. I think the should comes in with that we work in a world where everything changes. When you get comfortable with something, everything can change, right? So although I have been reporting to the same person for many years, and I've been so lucky in that, I think that's like it's a huge advantage that I have. I know him personally, professionally. I know about his personal life and his kids and what makes him tick and what he loves. He loves soccer and all those things that I know about him. One thing that I've never been able to predict is the volatility of working in corporate America, where your leadership and the C-level leadership and the people who are driving the decisions of how many people you have on your team and what your team is structured with and what type of CSMs you're supposed to be recruiting. those are the things that do change. And so right when you do get to know your leader, which is amazing, your leader is managing up to another leader who could be changing and who could want completely different things from their leader, right? So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, as soon as you get comfortable in that position, you're going to probably need to change, which is true with our customers as well. Most of our decision makers are with companies for 18 months, 2 years, possibly if we're lucky. And then we have to get to know a whole nother group of people who are going to be making those decisions. So it is the change and volatility that we feel and the ability to adapt is probably one of the biggest skills that we can learn really early on, so that we're not surprised when we have to relearn how to manage up or how to connect with someone on a different level.
Yeah. And I think we get kind of complacent just as you progress from individual contributor to manager, right? You feel like, at least this is what I went through, right? You feel like, well, these people work for the company. They should know what the mission is. They should know what the values are. And then these leaders should know exactly what we're trying to accomplish as a team. So you do kind of have this moment of, well, everyone should know what they're doing. And you forget about all the fact that you were doing this with customers consistently. And you have to revisit those primary practices of having the right sort of check-ins and building out the advocates and really getting the buy-in to the mission and the vision and outlining what those outcomes should be. So I think we're always going to struggle with this if we don't remember the basics of what customer success actually looks like. We're going to struggle with managing within our companies because we will forget those basics.
And that's why I brought it up. I brought it up to remind everybody that you're already doing this.
Yeah.
So don't get wrapped around the axle. Oh, how do I manage my boss? Right? You're already doing. You have the skills. You have the tools. You actually have the experience. Right?
Great webinar. This is great. This is perfect.
Yeah,
this is perfect ending point. Yeah.
Yeah. Just okay. We're done. All right. See you later.
See ya. You're doing it already. Good job.
That's really what I was getting at. Was remember that you actually know how to do this. You just replace customer with boss.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so true. I would also love to just say to everyone who is a customer success professional, I think that in all aspects of life and relationships, we have a huge upper hand, right? Like if you just think about this is your whole life. When you are listening, when you are leading with questions, when you are practicing empathetic upselling or trying to get people on your side, like you really are, that translates to every single aspect of your life. One thing I think when I was preparing for this call, I was reading some articles and something kind of struck me that I probably could do better, which is when you are trying to manage up, like, it's a new practice for you, you have new leadership, whatever it is, assessing yourself first. And that probably is one of the most difficult portions of this process of like, what do I bring to the table that is of value, but also what do I bring to the table that is going to help my leadership? Like what is going to help my leader, really, really be able to shine and be able to go to our other leadership and show like, look how great my team is, right? So it's like, what are those skills that I can give in order to present myself in the best possible light? So I think that assessing, Josh, I would love to know, you've done this longer than I have. So like what does that assessing look like? And how are you going to kind of take that long look in the mirror and write out exactly what you're going to bring to the table?
Yeah. Well, and I think you touched on it a little bit earlier without necessarily saying the words on this, but management is a service role. It's a role in which you are in service to other people, whether that's your team or to your upper management. You're always going to be in the middle of that flow, whether you're reporting to the board or you're reporting to a first level manager. The processes by which you understand what am I good at and what can I help influence the success of others in is probably the most critical part of all of that, right? I can only do so much, but we as a collective, as our team, can do so much more because the gestalt of it, right, is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So being able to understand, where do I sit? What are my skills? What are my weaknesses? What are the things that I'm needing to shore up? And what is my team good at? Then that gives you a better story that you can tell around, here's how we can contribute to the success of this company. And when you're talking to your manager, when you're talking to your executives, you're actually able to tell a meaningful story about this is why we matter. And that actually has implications, not just from, hey, we're doing a great job, but this is why the CS team as a whole is valuable to the company. Right now, you're backing it up with data and facts and the metrics that we've been able to accomplish. Here's our retention numbers. Here's our expansion numbers. Here's the way that our adoption is growing because of what we're doing. All of a sudden, that becomes that much more valuable.
Well, you're in this role, and I used to tell my teams all the time, my job is to get you what you need to be successful.
Yeah.
Right.
And then get out of the way.
It sounds cliche, but my job is that. Right.
Yeah.
And you end up in a middle manager leadership role, what have you, where there's somebody above you, whether it's a VP or it's the C-suite, right? Your job is to channel all of that to the leadership that you need to convince to do different things, that you need to communicate with, of the successes that you've achieved. Once again, though, right, if we're doing customer success right, we're connecting what's happening with our product or service and the effect it's having on the overall corporate objectives. Right. So your job in that role as a leader of a team is the same thing. My job is to ensure that the powers that be, who hold the purse strings, that make decisions on budgets and spend and hiring and all that stuff, or have a role in making those decisions, understand the value that's being achieved.
Yeah.
It is literally the same thing that we're trying to do with our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sorry.
Go ahead, Madison.
No, I was just going to speak about the changing environments that do happen and what you do with those. And there's an example. I have been a part now of a lot of changing environments, especially in my current role. My previous leader was very, very pure customer success, right? And I say that in terms of the customer experience was the end all be all. So when I would come to him with a problem, or if I needed him to have executive presence on a call with one of our customers, I was presenting to him in terms of, this is the relationship issues we're having with the customer, and this is what we need to solve for. I now am part of a very different organization where really we are mainly focused on the monetary, the monetary reward of the customer, right? So it has changed so significantly that when I come to my leadership to have those executive level calls with customers, I am presenting on, this is the X number we're going to lose if we don't save this customer. And, they're thinking about X, Y, Z. And so the way that I come with my hands open, asking for that help is very different. And I think that, making sure that we're always in a position of learning and adapting to those differences is critical, because my team might not look great when we're only thinking about the revenue side of it, right? They might be incredible practitioners of relationship building and empathy and, all of those things, but in that they might not be the best in ensuring that we're growing these accounts. If we suddenly only care about the upselling growth, I have to drastically change the way I present my team so that we all look like we're doing exactly what we need to be doing, right? So it's this constant play of breaking it down to its smallest form, and then making sure that those pieces that matter the most at this point are what you are going to capitalize on moving forward. And obviously that helps your boss, because they are also the one who's being held accountable to those new metrics as well. So everyone's learning. But if you can do that for them, your leader, it's really going to be a lot easier for them to show up and, make a case for you and your team, which is what you need them to do. So,
can either of you share a specific instance where managing up directly impacted either your professional growth or somebody on your team?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at that. So, very simplistic sort of example, but it's such a practical one, right? So I had hired a support person. So I was in charge of implementation support and customer success for a really, really small company a few years back, and hired this person to work on support. She was fantastic. She did a great job with our customers. She actually understood the product inside and out. And one of the things that I recognized within her was just the fact that she does build really great relationships with customers. And we were in an interesting situation where we had some really difficult customers around the support factor because our product was kind of just a mess. And the way that she handled this actually helped us achieve some really great successes. We got some great renewals. We were able to achieve some great expansions with some of these accounts. And one of the things that really made a difference for her was the fact that we were able to document and track her successes in the support side, which then very quickly turned into a promotion for her that she could now become a CSM and actually take on managing these accounts. And she did frankly, a kick-ass job. Just being able to come in and learn not just how to fix a problem, but then also mitigate risks in the future, and then be able to document it in a way that made it easy for me as a manager to be able to say, hey, this person needs to be promoted. This person needs to get moved up because she's doing a great job. So I think one of the things that helps with this is that there's got to be documentation all the way up. There's got to be some level of tracking successes all the way up. And to go back to the corollary of how we do customer success, right? The success plan, there's a success plan for our employees as well. There's a success plan for our teams that we should have. And I, as a manager, don't need to own that. The team members, the individual contributors, they can own that for themselves, document it, and then that becomes part of our conversations during our one-on-ones. That becomes part of our conversations on quarterly reviews. And that makes it so much easier as a manager to be able to say, here's a great story of a success that we can actually attribute to this person's accomplishments. And I think it's something that's worth showing off.
Well, and then you're able to do the, also what we need to do in customer success is make sure that we're communicating the value that's been generated to the right people farther up the stakeholder chain.
That's right.
Yeah. One practice I always do, and I think this is, when we're thinking about like the real life things that we can do starting tomorrow, is any time that you're going into a meeting where like a new initiative is going to be brought up, or you're going into a meeting where maybe it's like a standing meeting that happens every week. Don't be afraid to ask the question, those hard questions in the beginning of like, what are we trying to do here? What would you consider to be a success in this project or with this account? Or, how can we measure that we are doing a great job? Having each and every one of those written down. And then that's always, I call it like the circle. We're coming back to that every single solitary time. We're coming back to that on every single meeting. We're coming back to that at the end of every single meeting. And when your leader doesn't have to question whether you grasp what we are trying to gain here, that's kind of when the all of the stuff falls kind of to the wayside, and you can really have a more deep and personal relationship with your boss because they trust that you fully understand and you're asking those questions from the jump, so that you're not questioning what in the world are we actually trying to get here. Right. And I think that's in my position, that's a huge part of what we have to do, because when you do have changing leadership and you bring in a new CEO and what they want out of your entire company is different than the last person, right? So you were very product focused. Now you're incredibly focused on revenue generation as well as security, right? Securing that revenue moving forward. Okay, great. When I get on that next Red account call and we're going over these, all of my customers and we're going through like our save plans, you best believe that my save plan is going to be drastically different than it was when we were focused on product, right? Like it is very different because they care about things that are very different. So asking them, let's be real about this. What are you going to count as success? What would make you look great to my boss? Like, those questions, even as uncomfortable as they are, it's really important to ask those so that you can clearly define, at the end of the day, when you're doing your slides on like what your team has produced that quarter, it falls back to you. So make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you're trying to produce.
One of the things that, so there's a question that came up on the Q&A, and I'll just take a little bit of a stab on it. Defining success with the customer, sometimes it's hard to quantify or qualify what success looks like for your boss or your boss's boss if it's not clearly communicated. One of the things that we do in customer success that I think is really, really powerful is doing that for our customers. We come in with a plan. We come in with an idea of what success looks like for our products, for our services, and then we use that as a launching point for further conversations. To your point, Madison, when we are talking to our bosses, and to our bosses' bosses about what success looks like for our teams, we should come in with a plan, with an understanding of what success could look like, so that it does make it easy to document and be able to say, hey, Mr. Boss, Mrs. Boss, here's what I think our success is going to look like. Do you agree with this? Can we get sign off on this? Can we have an agreement? This is what we're working towards. And then that gives me as a manager a much better vision of how I'm going to utilize my team, how I'm going to distribute the work, how I'm going to assign them projects and tasks that are going to help achieve those specific goals. But there's got to be that shared language of what success actually means across the team.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. And once again, we get that through, establishing that kind of starting point and asking them lots of questions, and asking lots of good questions. It's again the same stuff we're doing with our customers. Madison, you got any stories about managing up and impacting the professional growth of you or somebody in your team?
Yes. So I think I alluded to this previously, but I manage a team in Canada, and our team in Canada was originally very, very small. They've grown significantly over time. But the one thing that was always different about Canada was that it was more of a managed service model than it was of a customer success model. So the CSMs really were doing absolutely everything. Our leadership had brought to me several concerns, how much time was being spent on these accounts, how much we were spending in tech dollars and support dollars to support these accounts, right? So I knew that it was a significant problem, and I was hearing that it was a problem, but I really it was not connecting with me how this was looking to higher ups, right? I wasn't able to connect the dots that they are truly questioning at the highest level, what are we doing in Canada? How can we make this much more efficient? Because we can't hire 70 people to manage this smaller number of accounts. So once I realized, once I did take that self-assessment, and I was like, okay, they're trying to tell you something, because it's been brought up on several occasions here. Your leader is trying to tell you this gentle as possible, but you need to identify how you're going to drastically increase your efficiency in Canada. And that included a restructuring of that team, ensuring that the initial sale was way more on the side of let's really clearly define what we're going to be able to provide for you when we sell these accounts, right? And that took lots of restructuring. But at the end of the day, we were able to, cut down on our support spend there, cut down on the amount of CSMs that were necessary per account, which was huge. And I think that it was a learning opportunity for me, because my boss can at times, he doesn't want to hurt me or be super upfront with what he needs from me. But I needed to ask him specifically, Chris, what would success look like in Canada? Are you looking for a 1 CSM to 30 account relationship? Or are you looking for a 1 CSM to 10 account relationship? If you can tell me that I can structure my plan to go after that breakdown in that model. And so, that took him also thinking about how would his leader define success in Canada. And it ended up, we met in the middle somewhere at, a 15 account relationship with our CSMs. And that has allowed us to grow and scale in that country on a large basis. But I think that now I always kind of go into those conversations with my leader, asking the tough questions of, you tell me, I think that this is what would be feasible. If we need to meet somewhere else, then let's meet somewhere else. But I'm going to tell you, this is what success would be to me. And I want to hear what it would look like to you. And then let's meet somewhere on what is, what's feasible for what we can accomplish with this team that we currently have, or if we need to hire more people. So being really diligent about that. And then also allowing him to, take the lead in presenting that to his leaders and showing that hey, I trusted my direct report enough to fix this and make this right. So, I think, again, it does come back to you sometimes have to have tough conversations, but then also always keep in mind, how is your leader going to be presenting this to his leadership? And how is he going to spin this to, position him in a place of leadership and authority?
I think what we've kind of danced around, and maybe we haven't said it exactly, but it's a mutual accountability across the board. That's really what we're talking about here. It's that I'm responsible to my team because I'm also responsible to my manager, and vice versa. I expect from my team things because I expect things from my manager as well. So like there's a interconnected chain of accountability that goes along with all of this, and we have to be comfortable with that process.
We have to be comfortable with that process. And we all need to be aligned.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody needs to be aligned. I love,
right.
love what you both said. One of the things that I used to do all the time was when I would have those conversations, and I've had some horrible bosses, but I've had some great bosses. When we had a situation, when we had an initiative, when we had something that needed to get done, and I was responsible, or my team was responsible for doing it, and it was, especially if it was complicated. I'd go and I'd have those discussions, and I'd sit down and clarify, and then I'd go back and I'd work on something, and then I'd go back and sit down with my boss again and say, okay, based off of what we said, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I've put together. Here's a straw man of what I was thinking, or here's what this, what you've asked for would look like if we put it into place. Does this make sense? There's nothing wrong with you, and I would encourage people to go back and say, okay, based off what you said, I've kind of drafted something. I want to make sure we're on the same page.
And a good manager, a good boss is going to be able to take that and be able to say, okay, either I messed up on clarification, or I need to flesh out some additional details for whatever reason. Like a bad boss is going to take a look at that and be like, well, you're just not paying enough attention. You're just not taking enough initiative like that.
Or in my case, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
So
yes,
I've had that from a bad boss say that to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't stay in that position very long. I don't work well with people who talk to me that way.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, anyone who uses that word, don't work for them. That's
no. That was a.
But I think that one portion is we sometimes forget that, like, sometimes our bosses, like, they just want to be involved in the process, right? Like, I like when my team comes to me, if there is, I don't need to be involved in every tiny little detail, but I do like to have the check-in of, like, I was thinking about going down this path. If you think we should go another path, or it's going to be more successful on another path, let me know. But I think anyone on this call can say, like, when your direct reports come to you and they have, I've got this issue, but I have these 3 plans. What do you think would be the best one that we could go with, right? That is always better than them coming to you and say, I have these 3 issues.
Right.
And then just crickets, and we hear nothing. We have nothing more from them, right? But I also don't love when one of my direct reports just sails off and does what they're going to do, and then I'm like, ooh, we missed the mark here. Like, you could have come to me 2 weeks in, and we could have readjusted the ship. Right. So I think that we need to give our leaders, like, that room too, to be like, okay, this was great, but have we thought about these 5 things? Like, have you assessed if this is going to work in these environments? So I definitely think that setting a realistic timeline to come back, I love that. Like, come back, present, get that feedback, and then action that feedback, and then move forward from there. That's probably the best way to do that. I mean, Andrew did say it perfectly, though. There are going to be times, unfortunately, where you have a boss that makes it near impossible to manage up, right? Like, that does happen, where you're not in a position where you can find middle ground. Either it's that your values completely misalign, or what you thought was going to come of this position is completely different than what they see for this position, which I think we've all probably been there. But that does happen, right? So it's like, it's important to know that you can manage up to a degree until you're in a position where, like, you're not able to go anywhere past this point, because this leader has no intention of having you go past this point. So I'd be interested to know, Josh, if you've ever had that happen, or like, what do you do when you can't move past, when your boss calls you an idiot? Like, what do you do?
I think this goes back to something that we said earlier, right? It's know thy audience, right? Know who your boss is, know what their driving forces are, know what actually is going to incentivize them for their career as well. It's really hard to work with a bad boss, and I'm lumping it all together and just under that umbrella term. Bad boss is kind of a good way of putting it. there's a question. I know, Andrew, I'm gonna jump ahead on one of the questions that you would ask here, but about I know, roll your eyes at me. It's okay. About
all right, Josh.
If it's backfired, if anything is backfired in terms of managing up. And I think this scenario.
Well, that's why I was going to ask that next. Has managing up ever backfired on you?
Yes. And it has, because there's two factors. Number one is if I didn't do the preparation that I needed to do to actually make a good decision about how to proceed with something, because I brought it to my boss and I wasn't prepared. I didn't have all the data, whatever. That's one case. The second case is what we're talking about, where I had a bad boss that didn't have either my team's best interest in mind, they didn't understand what they were trying to accomplish, or they just weren't willing to listen and they thought of me as an idiot, or they thought of me as incompetent, or whatever, right? Those circumstances are when it does backfire, and it can have really bad lasting impact on you in your career in some cases. So it is a risk. But I think this is where we have to prepare ourselves with knowledge and prepare ourselves with as much awareness about what the circumstances are, so that we can do the best, our best foot forward around, hey, this is something that I want to present to you, and here's how I need your help. Here's how I want you to show up as my manager for this particular circumstance. It's hard to do that if you have a really bad boss, frankly.
It is. But also, even if you have a good boss, you don't just show up and throw up.
You don't.
Right. One of the things I used to coach my teams on all the time was, and I've gotten grief for this, right? But and maybe I just don't explain it enough, but I tell people all the time, don't just bring me problems, come to me with solutions. And I don't mean that you're going to have all the solutions, but at least freaking try and think about it, right? Yeah. Don't show up and drop a huge pile of whatever on my desk and look to me to be the one that's going to solve it. And I do the same with I've always done the same with my bosses. I'm not going to show up to my boss and say, I've got this problem, fix it, right? Show up with some ideas, show up with some solutions. And this goes for whether you're sitting in a middle management role and you've got a team reporting to you, or you're an individual contributor. And I know we have a few on this webinar. You're an individual contributor and you're trying to manage up to your boss. Well, let me tell you something. That is, a way to endear yourself with your boss is not just showing up with the challenges that you have, but some ideas. Even if those ideas are completely way off base,
right?
At least you put the effort into thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right. You put the effort into, I got this problem and here's how I'm thinking about it, and let your boss help you kind of refine your thinking or give you some guidance, but at least take the effort. Right.
And I think the same goes for, like I always say, request versus complaints. I do understand we're all working in a world where a job is, you're always going to have things that you would change, make different, all of these things. Right. But it's like, why don't we come with requests? Like if it's something that means that much to you, then request that we do something differently. But that complaint with no action behind it or plan behind it is absolutely invaluable. It has no value to me, right? We're just sitting here wasting 10 minutes that we could have been talking about a real problem that you're having. And so it's huge to me that you do have to come with something. And any boss, I believe, would rather have that than have a full-blown just complaint fest where you're just going to have a bunch of issues and let that be your entire one-on-one.
Yeah.
I was interested in they're in a previous position. I want to make sure and say that, since everyone knows that my boss was going to be on here. In a previous position, I did have a bit of an issue with this, and I'd be interested if we are on the same lines, but managing up can sometimes hurt your chances of moving past that level to which your boss is, right?
Yeah.
I have had bosses who have stifled my ability to move past them, even though I think we all knew that they were not in a position where they really should have been, maybe they weren't quite aligned to what we were doing in CS. And, they should have probably been in more of a sales type role. And it was just very evident that they weren't super interested in helping me to manage up or helping me to look great to those people who were above them, So I think that there are definitely moments when you have to kind of come to that realization that, okay, either I need to start to modify the way that I'm managing up to have a broader scope and scale so that more people can see what I'm doing, what my team is doing, and making that more evident so that it can kind of go past my direct leader. If that direct leader is not going to, do what needs to be done to put you in a position where you are being seen by the upper leaders in your group or in your team. So that's something that I do think about a lot, because you don't want to be stuck in the position that you're in, but also to protect the feelings of your direct leader. Maybe they're not doing all that much to put you in a place where you're going to shine. So
that's, and I'm going to have to, so you got to be really careful with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to be really careful with that, Madison, right? Circumventing your immediate supervisor to seek validation for your proposals is a great career limiting move. So you need to, that's a calculated risk that you are going to take if you do that. So I have been in those positions before. I have taken that calculated risk myself, and it didn't backfire on me. It actually exposed my boss for the incompetent boob that he was. Okay, but it doesn't always turn out that way.
100%. And I want to make it very clear that I don't have to do that in this position, because my boss does, open a window for me always to have that level with our leadership. So definitely want to say that. And I think that there's probably people in this call who have both sides of it. They have great bosses who do put them in a position where they're able to shine, or they have bosses who, I would consider that a bad boss, though. Like, if you have a boss who is not putting you in that position, I would encourage you to consider looking for another position, right? Like, look for 100%. Someone who is going to cultivate you and your leadership skills and your abilities to move up. So,
and that's such an important, forgive me for interrupting, but that's such an important factor, especially in the situation I'm in right now, where I'm looking for a new job, where I'm looking for a new position. One of the things that I'm looking for is, can I manage up with these people that I'm talking to? Can I have a relationship that allows me to come in and, frankly, screw it up periodically? And is it going to be okay to manage the expectations appropriately so that I can learn in the process? That's something that's incredibly valuable. And if you have that right now in a role, then you're just incredibly lucky, very fortunate. If you're not, and to your point, Madison, like, it's worth finding that. It's very worth finding somebody that you can actually be in a safe space to actually manage up appropriately, because otherwise it can be a living hell.
Yeah, being open to learning and growing yourself and being coached is super important as well. Hey, let's get to some of these questions, because, wow, we've talked about this now we got about 25 minutes left. Just a reminder, we will go until 15 minutes past the hour. And if you do have questions, post them or upvote the questions that we do have. If you can't stick around after the top of the hour, we will be putting a recording and a transcript of this webinar on our website. Ashley, that goes up to Tuesdays? Tuesday next week, I think?
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yeah, by Tuesday next week. So our first question comes from, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Davia. Davia asks, thank you for the question, Davia, by the way. Davia asks, is there a tool that you like to use to help documenting those wins for your team? Or we were talking about the wins that you then can translate, that you can message to your leadership. Do you have any special tool? I mean, I use Google Sheets.
Yeah. I was going to say an Excel spreadsheet, Word document. Yeah. Like, I don't think there needs to be a special tool for it. There just needs to be the process associated with doing that.
Yeah.
Yes. And the review. So one other thing, Davia, is I do like to put the ownership on my individual contributors, right? Like, hey, it is incredibly imperative that you are keeping track of what you are doing and how you're, like, that's the best tool that you can learn in your professional career, is like, how are you going to make sure that you're well documented in all of the things that are going to either set you apart or get you in a position for the next role that you want to be in? Or maybe you got great feedback from, like, someone else on a different team. Like, keep all of that. Those are the things that are going to be so invaluable when you're trying to position yourself with your leader. So I don't necessarily think that it's so much about, like, the leader keeping track of that, as I really hope that the individual team member is making sure that they're bringing those things and they're comfortable bringing those things to their leader, right? Like that's incredibly important that they feel that open chain of communication to be like, hey, I got this great feedback, or hey, I did this awesome, I finished the project. You want to see how it went, that type of thing.
There's a callback here, Andrew, for the imposter syndrome conversation that we had too, because this is also a double whammy, double prize, I guess. If you track this for your internal purposes, for being able to manage up, you're also tracking it for your own career, for your own, avoiding that imposter syndrome.
Yes. And the other thing I want to remind people of, you want to, once again, follow the same playbook that you would follow for customer success.
Yeah.
Make sure that you are netting it out. Okay. You need to remember, you leaders and your leaders have to look at things a mile wide, but only an inch deep. Yeah. So you net things out. By doing this project, I was able to increase efficiency by X percent, and be prepared to go deeper, but fixate on the metrics, the things that your leadership is interested in hearing.
And cares about. Yes.
Right? That they care about. Don't go into a long freaking diatribe about, oh, well, here's a process I use, blah, 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 blah. Right? They are interested in outcomes.
Yeah.
Just like your customers.
Yep.
So, Davia, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the question. Liz asks, in a state where our company is changing its views on success and how we measure that, how can we still demonstrate our importance as a CS team? For example, do you have some set value metrics that you believe are beneficial to show regardless of the official metrics defined by the leadership team? And it looks like, Madison, you wanted to jump in on this right out of the gate.
Yes. So I think the way that you're asking the question is like, if your leadership is only concerned with retention and upsell, what are the other things that you bring to the table to round out what your team does, right? So if I'm reading your question correctly, I would say that one thing we always do is we do a postmortem every month from my team of what went well, what could have gone better, and what was atrocious, right? Like, what do we never want to do again? And in these postmortems, we do include our upper leadership in a readout on this. So what that allows us to do is to say that we have, outside of the metrics that we're held accountable for, everyone is probably held accountable for retention and downsell and churn and all those things, right? So like, who cares? Your leader is going to present on those. But what helps your leadership know that you are producing well-rounded customer success leaders is when you come forward and say, hey, we also thought that we could have done better as a team at identifying risk much faster. And the way we're going to do that next time is we built this early warning system. So now, like, once DL count goes down, we know that we've got to jump all over this. So it's showing those items, and Andrew just hit on this, like showing the outcomes from those items that it's going to drive the value. I'm speaking specifically about my chief customer officer. He doesn't really care how we got there. He could truly care less, like what in the world we did to get to an early warning system. What he cares about is that, oh, we're going to catch downsell 6 months earlier. Love it. Love it. Great idea. Loved it. Thought it was a great idea. So it's like those things, like constantly keeping in your mind that if downsell is always on his mind, which it is, he is reporting to a CEO who cares about the bottom line, right? So what's going to make him look great is if he gets to go and say, this was our downsell for this quarter, but we have a system that will get us in front of downsell 5 months earlier. And that will truly impact how much we're going to have to, show at the end of the year. So I think that like having those conversations with your teams, also making sure that your team understands what is important. No CSM should be sitting there at their desk thinking, I wonder what our CEO thinks is important about what we do here, right? Like, what would they be working for? What are they doing every day? How are they structuring their calls with their customers? They should have a clear, definitive answer as to every day we are doing XYZ because that is what our company has mandated as the most important things, period, across the board. So just make sure that you're highlighting those, but also showing the creativity that your team has to address those topics, but only in the outcome scenario. Like, we did all this, but the outcome is that we also are helping drive the bottom line.
Well, and I love the way you put that, Madison. We taught you these metrics that you were referencing. These are trailing indicators.
Yes.
I think it's incredibly powerful when you can come to the table and say, and by the way, I'm not going to give you the gory details of, how we implemented this early warning system, but we're doing things that, we're creating leading indicators that we're keeping an eye on that allow us to affect the trailing indicator. The CEO, the CFO, the CRO, they're interested in downsell, retention, churn, and those are all trailing indicators. Something has happened or hasn't happened that will have an effect on that. Well, what are we doing? I think it's really compelling when you can bring to the table, once again, not the gory details, but those little tidbits that say, by the way, we implemented a system that allows us to proactively go after these situations, and it has resulted in an increase in retention.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think the other factor to this is something you said earlier, Andrew, of give them a snippet of what you've done and how the outcomes are going to be met, but then have the depth underneath the surface that you can go back to. And what I'm talking about in the depth is have the playbooks reflect what metrics we're actually trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And then have those playbooks be well-defined and documented. So to your question, Liz, like if you don't know what those metrics are, and you're asking the questions, once you find out what those metrics can be, then build the playbooks around those. And then that makes it so much easier for a CSM to come in and be able to say, oh, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. And that makes your job a lot easier as a manager to be able to manage up and share the outcomes of what the team is doing.
Sure.
Awesome. Liz, thanks for the question. Thanks for joining us. Madison, can you hit done on that question, please?
Yeah.
Our next question comes from anonymous attendee who seems to pop up in every one of these webinars these days. Can you provide any advice or recommendations for new CSMs who are just starting to navigate the process of managing up within their organization? I think we talked about a few of these, right? Understanding what your manager's needs are. What else?
Keeping your boss in the loop.
Keeping your boss in the loop.
Working to have a deep understanding of who your boss is and what they would
learning and adapting to their communication style, their way of working.
And I would add, this is probably a more fluffy topic here, but remember that your bosses are human as well. There's a humanity element to all of this, right? Definitely get to know them personally, get to know them, but also recognize where their weaknesses are. If you can find those things out, not from a like, hey, I have this against you, or I have this hanging out there.
Don't judge or evaluate them, right?
Right. And don't expect perfection out of your bosses.
Exactly.
Right. Come in with the understanding that they're going to make mistakes, but give them opportunities for them to be successful on your behalf as well.
I love that. I was just thinking about this. So if your boss struggles with let's say that it's like timeline management, right? Like they let deadlines slip away. If you can, you're working on a project with your leader. If you can push your team to meet and reach those deadlines, and then it's nothing about you. Your boss gets to say he reached that deadline. Yeah. He will never forget that you did that for him, right? That you helped him get to that goal. And so I think that you're so right. Like, let's help them look great, and it does help you in return as well. Like you want your organization to look like a powerhouse. And for that to happen, your leader has to look like a powerhouse, right? So like when I think people are talking about majors, I'm like, I hope they're talking about the greatest CS team in the world, and that's because we show up every day, our leader advocates for us, and we do the work for him to make him look great. So I think that, thinking about the collective, one thing as Americans, we're not great at this. We're always thinking about the individual instead of the whole. But the truth is that you need to be thinking about the collective, right? Like we all have to look amazing, and your leader is the top of that pyramid. So if he can't reach a deadline, help him, and then he'll look great, and you'll look great.
And once again, this goes back to standard principles of customer success. Your job is not to make your company look good. Your job is to make your customer, your key stakeholder, look like the smartest person in that company for embracing you, right?
Yeah, the best decision they could ever make. Yes.
Exactly. And that's how I used to coach my teams on that all the time. Like, our job is not to implement this software. It's not to ring the bell in the office that we closed a deal or we launched, we implemented a solution. It's to make the person who decided to take a chance on us look like the smartest person in front of their management. Yeah. And if you work for a good boss, they're going to take you right up with them. And they're also going to make sure to expose the value that you brought.
I did love what Roy said in the chat. He said, I did have that one boss that I questioned if he or she was really human.
We've all had that boss. I've had a couple.
Yeah.
That's so good. It's so true. Like, is this a robot? I'm not 100% sure they ever sleep.
Yeah.
Let's see. How are we doing? All right. We got about 13 minutes left, so we can probably get through all these questions. So if you got any more questions, throw them out here. Another anonymous attendee question. My boss and I originally had difficulties aligning, but have found better ways to work together. However, I am a realist, and he likes everything to be candy-coated, which is tough for me and feels like fluff. I like to get down to it. Any advice here?
Can I take this one? Because I think
Please.
A real life example here. I think everyone on this call can probably realize I might skew more on the candy-coated side, right? So my boss, who was supposed to be on this call, is probably one of the most sarcastic people I have ever come in contact with, like ever. He will say things and I legitimately have to ask him, is this real or is this sorry? Like I can't, I'll have to legitimately just be like, was that real, what you are saying? So and it took a long time for us to reach this medium of like being able to understand each other and communicate. And now we're actually like genuinely friends. So I would say to this, that number one, like definitely stick it out. But number two, I think that like humor is probably the best way in this specific situation to find some common ground, right? Like your boss seems to be great, right? Like, so what? They like to make things better and find the good in everything. Okay, great. So why don't you come on the other side with a little bit of humor possibly and just be like, well, that was some fluff. Now let's get down to it. Like I think that there's ways that you can just break the ice. If you think that your leader doesn't know that you're more straightforward, you're wrong. They know this about you. They know that you're probably, a straight shooter. You want to get into your one-on-one and get right down to it. But I would encourage you, your next one-on-one that you have, why don't you ask your boss a question about themselves? Like, hey, when you're not here, what do you love to do? Or, even a silly question, like, if you were a fish, what type of fish would you be? I promise this is going to like break that ice of the difference between someone who's like really, I guess, candy coated or like really, out there on their own planet versus someone who's really down to earth. And then from there, it will be easier to understand the human aspect of each other and like where each of you comes from, right? I think that there's tons of common ground to be found here, but I would encourage you, ask them a question first, like let them in a little bit and let them get to know you a little bit as well. And y'all will find that rapport together.
Yes, allow them to get to know you, anonymous attendee. One thing though that you also might want to consider is that maybe your boss is asking you for the candy-coated version because your boss needs to convey a candy-coated version.
That could be it too. Yep.
So what if times are really tough right now? Like, what if you are in a position where it's like, these are rough? And I mean, we're all here, right? Like these are different times for customer success than they've ever been before. I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing about it. But what if your boss needs that? Like they need that. It's all going to be okay. We're all going to do just fine. We're going to hit these numbers. We're going to get this retention. Like, what's so bad about that, right? Like,
tell me a story. Tell me a story.
So I'm gonna say a joke I wasn't planning on using. I had said it during our pre-work, right?
Okay.
This is
it off color?
No,
off color joke?
I mean, I can share those, but probably offline. What this sounds like for me is basically communication styles. And the first thing that comes to mind is how my wife and I communicate. And when we talk about managing your boss, I spend plenty of time managing up to my wife to make sure that she knows that I'm doing the right things at home while she's at work, right? What it sounds like to me in this case is that this is a communication style conflict, and you need to spend some time understanding what communication works for your boss. In this particular case, they may be, and to Andrew's point, right? Maybe they need to convey a candy-coated message, but you won't know unless you ask. If you are willing to seek to understand and willing to seek to find out why, then the what becomes so much easier, right? You can actually address what exactly is necessary as opposed to just trying to approach and have that conflict all the time.
Yes.
And quite frankly, if they insist on just candy coated because that's what they like to hear, maybe next time you come in the office, bring them a pair of rose colored glasses as a joke, right? Yeah. So,
and I think it's also fun. Like you could, I don't know if you feel, I don't want you to lie to them, but like to say, like, I appreciate the fact that you come with such positivity to all of our one-on-ones or to all of our meetings. Saying that lets them know that you understand that like they're coming with a very specific attitude to these things, right? And like it's like, hey, I get it, and I think that also builds some rapport and like I understand where you're coming from. Getting to know people is hard, guys, and like they are your boss though, so I feel like it's in your best interest to try really hard to get to know them.
Once again, use the same skills that you use to get to know your customers, right? Yeah. Open-ended questions, having a conversation, not an interrogation, right? Same playbook. Some of my most valuable customers were built from having just real conversations with people, getting to know them. One of my biggest customers, were my biggest spenders when at one of my previous companies. I walked into this executive's office, first meeting, and we sat down, and this executive was a huge golfer, loved playing golf. There was golf stuff all over their office. And we sat down for an hour meeting and spent the first 45 minutes just shooting the shit about golf.
Yikes.
Right. And this person ended up being one of my biggest. This individual was responsible for the single largest percentage of my book of business.
Wow.
Right. Because I got to know them. And it's the same thing with your boss. Get to know your boss. Carol asks, I've been a CSM with two of my coworkers, and I've been promoted to the leader of the team a couple of months ago. Congratulations, Carol. Got any tips on how to switch from being a coworker to a manager? Wow, that can be a challenging situation. We're actually working on a leadership track that we've been working on for too long now. We're hopefully going to be releasing it in the first half of next year. The first course in that track is the CSM as the leader coach, or I'm sorry, the worker coach. But Madison, what it looks like you want to jump in on that out of the gate. What suggestions do you have for Carol to be able to balance that?
Well, first of all, congrats, Carol. I was in that exact position here. So when I first came to my job that I'm in now, I took over for my boss. So he got promoted. I took over all of his accounts. And then when I got promoted to leader, I had someone on my team take over all of my accounts. So as you can imagine, it's like this kind of, we call it like the family tree or something. Like we've all been here for too long and we all have each other's customers at this point. So I was now leading a team of 12 people who all used to be my peers, right? It's very difficult at times to move from that position. I would say my two most valuable pieces of advice are, number one, obviously establish that right off the bat cadence with your individual, like with your reports, right? Like make sure you're having those one-on-one conversations with them and immediately address the elephant in the room, right? Like you have to have that conversation of, hey, this is how I foresee this transitioning, right? Like how I foresee our leader to employee relationship moving forward. Do you have any other thoughts about that? Like, would you want it to be structured a little bit differently? How would you like that to go? That way you're saying what you want, they're saying what they want, and then you can meet in the middle somewhere on a compromise for each other. But don't let it go unsaid. You need to say, hey, we're different now, like it's different now. What I was doing before, I can't keep doing. And now I really am responsible, and let them know, like I'm responsible for the outcomes of this team. That means that in that responsibility, I'm going to have to do X, Y, and Z to meet those responsibilities. That way, I promise you, these people who have worked with you, I hope that they love you and that they want to do well for you. I had that privilege. Like these people, we had been great friends, and it just switched to them really wanting to perform so that as a team, we all won together. Right. And so like, that's kind of like the best case scenario there. But I would say my biggest piece of advice is like, have that direct conversation and clearly define what you need to be successful in that role. And, make sure they understand that like you expect them to come alongside you to make that happen. Right. Like, don't leave that unsaid. Like, hey, you gotta get on board too. And if they can't, then obviously you track that and you have that conversation later on how that needs to be addressed. And we've been there too, right? So I think that's my advice. But congrats and enjoy. Yeah. Being a leader is such a joy.
I've got two things I want to add, but one thing that you said really strikes me, Madison, is addressing the elephant in the room is so important. Like, you can't ignore that sort of stuff. Otherwise, it just eats away at the foundation that you're trying to build. The second thing is an old adage that I like repeating all the time. It's people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. If you can't show your team and your peers, the people that you're working with, that you care about their success, then it doesn't matter what you're trying to do as a manager. And this goes back to what I said earlier. My job switched from being a customer success manager to an employee success manager. And as a result of that switch, that means that my success is built on your success as my team. If I'm doing my job well, I'm basically out of the way while you guys are conquering mountains. And that's a huge statement to be able to make to your team, that allows them to understand that, yeah, I'm in your corner and I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you actually achieve your successes and your aspirations. We're going to work together on this. And then the final thing that I was going to say on this is that, like, the dynamics of being promoted and all that sort of stuff, a lot of times gives us this sense of power. It feels like we are now on top of the world, right? We've got to remember that we don't own our teams. We don't own their career. We don't own their lives outside of work. We don't own, frankly, even their lives inside of work. We own the responsibility of helping them be successful. They own their career. They own their aspirations. They own their goals. So all we're doing now is just being a facilitator of that success. And if you start treating them like you own them, then you're automatically going to undermine any sort of value that you might add as their manager. And that's something to be mindful of, especially as a new leader. Otherwise, you're potentially going to, that's going to be really damaging to your relationship as a manager for your team.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh, Madison. Yeah, you mentioned, and once again, it's not cliche. My job is to help you be successful. And it's been part of my management ethos for more than 2 decades. Mm-hmm. It was always something that I would ensure that my teams knew, they understood, right? And as leaders, that's something that we need to impress upon our teams. And it's not just it can't just be lip service, right? And the better we treat our people and the better we arm them to be successful, the harder they're going to work for us, the more productive they're going to be, and the better they're going to be able to deliver for our customers.
Yes.
I'm a huge fan of Sir Richard Branson. For those of you that are regularly on this webinar series, I've mentioned him before. One of his tenets of his management philosophy is customers are not number one, my people are number one. Because if I treat my people well, then that's going to flow down to my customers. Yeah. And with that, we're at the end of our time that we've got for today, but I think it was a great conversation, but it's not what I think, it's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Coaching. Once again, I want to thank our guests for spending the time and for the ideas and the thoughts and the insights and the best practices that you shared with us. One final note, great CS leaders know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created the CS Leadership Roundtable, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our final event of the year, December 6th, when we'll talk about how customer success roles and responsibilities differ in various companies and industries. Until then, Make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everybody. See you soon.